Welcome to Ayurveda 101. I am really excited to be talking to you about Ayurveda and some practices that will hopefully give you some tools to improve your life. It's such an honor to get to share this vast well of wisdom. It has such power to transform and in such simple and intuitive ways. So, I'm going to be giving you an overview of the basics of Ayurveda and some very simple practical things that we can all do to work a little bit more rhythmically with the seasons. So, what is Ayurveda? Ayurveda is a 5,000-year-old science of healing and maintaining health with wisdom that we innately already possess. It's on one hand so extensive and complete, and yet so very simple and common sense. Ayurveda is said to be a sister science of yoga. Both originated in the ancient world of India and have been practiced for thousands of years. Both begin from the premise that we are spiritual beings, so that who we are is pure spirit, and that we are living in a world and in a body made up of matter. So, because of that, because we have senses, and because our senses perceive matter, we begin to think that that is what we are, that that is the entirety of who we are. So, we choose things based on the pleasures, the desires, the aversions that we have in the material world, and that often ultimately cause us imbalance. So, yoga is the study of the awakening of us to who we really are as pure spirit. And there are many, many practices that guide us on that path. And there are many, many ways of thinking and feeling into what that means to us individually. But Ayurveda then is how do we manage to navigate living in this world with these bodies? So, yoga, to contrast, is a spiritual study to awaken to the truth of who we are. And then Ayurveda supports that by studying matter, the nature of the material world. And they are meant to be practiced together, but you don't need to be a student of yoga in order to incorporate Ayurvedic wisdom and practices into your life. It's a holistic model of health that looks at the whole person. So think about when your body is feeling good, your mind is sound, you're spiritually fulfilled, you're meeting your financial goals, your relationships are healthy, you're discovering and fulfilling your life's purpose, you feel great, you're thriving. So these are all things that are addressed on an Ayurvedic coaching journey. So it's personal transformation coaching that is rooted in the principles of Ayurveda that we're going to talk about right now. So Ayurveda is the art of living in harmony with nature, of recognizing that our bodies are made up of the same stuff as the universe. So the elements of space, air, fire, water, and earth. So space as the container through which air moves, fire, which is the element of heat and transformation, water of flow and adaptation, and earth of stability and structure. So, who we truly are physically is a vibration of all of those elements, each of us in a slightly different proportion. So, we each carry all of those elements and are each made up of a different proportion of them, with a couple dominating. So, I'm going to share my screen now and give you a couple of visuals to help you understand. Okay, so these five elements combine to form three doshas or constitutions. And each of these doshas is made up primarily of two of the elements. And those doshas, these combinations of elements, describe us. They describe our physical makeup and our tendencies, both physically and emotionally. They describe the energy of the seasons. They describe the different times of day, of pretty much everything. So Ayurveda says that disease is nothing but an imbalanced state of the doshas. So we're going to talk about each dosha here. So Vata is the first dosha. It's kind of the king dosha, and it's made up of air and space, and it's made up of the principle of movement. It guides the principle of movement. So thinking about the wind, the circulation of blood in your body, of communication, which is the movement of information. Pitta, made up of fire and water, is the energy of transformation. So it's our digestion, transforming our food into nutrients. Kapha then is made up of water and earth, And it's our structure, so our bones, our muscles. It's the structure of the world we live in, the mountains and the oceans. It's solid and steady. So at conception, we are made with a unique combination of these elements, or doshas. And some of you might already know your original doshic makeup, but you don't need to know it for this presentation. And if you are curious, please contact me for a consultation. So we'll start with we start with a doshic blueprint in our lives. So we call that prakriti. Then as we grow, as we age, as we live in particular environments, take in impressions through our senses, we experience dietary and seasonal changes. We then go through changes ourselves. And at any given moment in time, that original constitution can be altered to a state of imbalance. So I mentioned that your original constitution is called prakriti. So your current state is called vikriti. So if you've ever heard those terms, that's the difference. Matter is always changing, and Ayurveda helps us to understand what brings on imbalance and brings about more balance so that we can live with more vibrance, vitality, ease, and joy to thrive in all aspects of our lives. So not just to be healthy, but to be deeply situated in our self, which is svasta. Then when something is out of balance, which happens to everyone, we live in a material world, not only do we know what to do, we can still be svasta, centered in ourselves. So Ayurveda is a science of balancing these doshas through diet, lifestyle, and sometimes interventionary herbs and other treatments. When we know our constitution, the effects our choices and our environment have on our physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual selves, and are able to recognize small imbalances daily, then we have agency over our own health and how we show up in the world. So the cause of most imbalance and ultimately disease is going against your natural wisdom, the wisdom of your nature, of nature itself. And that's there at the bottom of the slide. So let's go deeper into the qualities of the doshas. I find it sometimes easiest to start with looking at the seasons because we really know well the qualities of each season and how they vary. So starting with Vata. Vata is associated with fall and winter, and again, of air and space. So I'd like you to imagine that you're sitting outside on a late fall day. It's cool, even cold. It's dry outside. It's a clear, blustery day when leaves are falling. The feeling is light, it's crisp and clear, expansive, and you feel the energy of change as you see the leaves falling and changing color. Just think about how unpredictable the weather is in the fall, right? One day it's freezing and the next day you're hiking in a t-shirt. So how quickly the leaves are suddenly dry and off the trees. That expansiveness, that changeability in nature, and therefore in us at that time of year, because we are a part of nature and can't be separated from what's happening out there, that can be, on a positive note, can be adaptive. You can feel inspired, and Vata can facilitate creative thinking, the willingness to move and change. A lot of times we'll take on new things in the fall. You know, you'll start a new class or a new venture. However, if you sit out in that environment long enough, if that energy becomes too much or accumulates, eventually that exposure to the cold and the wind can make you feel ungrounded or unsettled. How do you feel on a super windy day, right? It can cause anxiety. That energy in you and that dryness can turn into dryness disorders like constipation. So the seat in our physical bodies of these imbalances starts in the digestive tract, and that's often where you'll first notice imbalance in your elimination. So Vata individuals are more prone to constipation than any other digestive disorder. Okay, so moving on to Pitta. Pitta, to recap, is fire and water and is the energy of summer. So think now that you're sitting outside again, but now it's a hot, muggy summer day. And we all know that feeling of the heat, and it's a denser feeling than that crisp fallness, right? It's warm and it's moist, and for a while you feel enveloped, held, alive, and even optimistic. Fire also transforms, so we get wildfires in the summer that transform the landscape. Internally, it's our digestive fire, it's our motivation. It helps us transform ourselves and our lives. But eventually, that much heat, how do you feel when you're exposed to that weather for too long? It feels stuffy, we can get irritable or even angry. Internally, our digestion starts to move too fast. like a wildfire out of control. So a primarily pitta individual might be prone more to inflammatory conditions and digestively more to diarrhea. So finally, we have kapha. So kapha is water and earth and is predominant in the spring. So let's go back outside again, and here you are on a cool, rainy, and calm spring day. There's new life, vegetation. You feel calm and content listening to the rain. You notice that the earth is strong and stable. This is the densest of the seasons, and within you, there is groundedness and commitment, loyalty, and you feel substantial. So that weight, that hypnotic rain, eventually can make you feel sleepy and eventually unmotivated, too heavy, lethargic, even depressed and congested. Too much water combined with earth gets stuck, right? So in the spring we get coughs, there's a lot of phlegm in the spring, it's mud season. So you might recognize yourself in one of these doshas. We all have all of them in us and should. And you might be realizing that you feel these different ways during the different seasons, or that you resonate overall more strongly with one or two of them over your lifetime. So our job is to, yes, live with the seasons and embrace their energy, but also to balance out their extremes by adjusting our diet and lifestyle. So let's talk about that word balance. Balance is like a point that is only still and constant in theory, but it's really kind of moving and vibrating and exploring and finding. And to be in balance is to dance around that point with flexibility and resilience. And so when we don't brush off little feelings of being off, but recognize the direction those warning signs are showing us that we're starting to swing, we can micro adjust. So balance is that ever-changing dance or vibration around perfection, never a stopping point. But rather than oscillating wildly and feeling out of control, Ayurveda teaches us to do that little dance with nature and with life. Oscillate too far, and medical intervention is necessary. And thank goodness for Western medicine for those acute issues. But that treatment can push us back the other way as well, and we can end up in a never-ending cycle of extremes. So Ayurveda recognizes 6 stages of disease. And only by the 3rd or 4th stage does Western medicine even register something as a symptom. But we, as perceptive beings in our own bodies, can notice at stage 1 when something doesn't feel quite normal for us. So it might be an emotion. So for instance, I might be noticing I'm feeling irritable today and snapping at people. So I can notice that and recognize that my pitta is high. Or it might be in the digestion, for instance, heartburn, which would also be indicate pitta being a little high. That could progress further to become a headache. So you know you need to do some cooling practices. And the treatment is so simple in Ayurveda. Like increases like, and opposites bring balance. That's the main principle for healing in Ayurveda. Like increases like, and opposites bring balance. So on a very simple level, if you're cold, are you going to reach for an ice cold glass of water? No, you'd have some warm tea. So if you know that anger and irritability and heartburn are hot, fiery conditions, so you're going to oppose that with cooling practices. So you're not going to choose further heating by eating spicy food today, or by doing a super intense workout, or to take another example, if you're feeling, so if you're experiencing some anxiety, by understanding Ayurveda, you'll know that that is a light, dry, and rough quality. And you'll counter that with heavier, moist, and smooth foods to ground you back down to earth. So it becomes a matter of knowing the qualities of foods and activities to oppose or increase what you're feeling. And it's the art of paying attention. You know, what do I need now based on what's going on now? What do I want ultimately more than I want what I want right now? Because our minds can tell us that we want something, but our wisdom knows what we need. So your emotions and your digestion are always on the front lines, telling you how you're doing and what you need. And knowing this, these daily practices that we're going to talk about next become more than a luxury. That self-care is medicine. So that you're showing up for yourself in your life in a way that truly satisfies. And in this way, Ayurveda also becomes an energy management system. So there are things that we can all do on a daily basis that are common to us and can be tweaked for our individual constitution. One of the best things that we can all do, no matter how busy or varied our schedules are, and actually especially if our schedules are busy and varied, is to create some semblance of a routine. And this is called dinacharya. So I'm going to lay out here some ideas for you of things that you might just cherry pick to try based on your instinct about what might be of greatest value to your life and which you feel confident that you would actually do and be successful at. So I'm going to screen share again. So the times of day, as I've mentioned before, also have a dominant dosha, just like the different seasons do, that we can either lean into and use to our advantage or actively oppose to stay balanced. So starting with the hours of 6 to 10 a.m. 6 to 10 a.m. is ruled by kapha. There's an energy of kapha to that time of day, no matter who you are. So remember that kapha is water and earth and is the densest and heaviest energy. It's the best time for routine because of that stability. So use kapha to your advantage. Most self-care practices can be done now. And I'm not going to go into every single thing that Ayurveda suggests, but if you are up much later than 6 a.m. and certainly later than the sunrise, you'll find that you're too tired and heavy to get up. It actually gets more difficult to get up the later you move into that time, and that's kapha. So once you're up, you can use kapha's steadfastness to do the same thing every day, the best time for routine. So number one, drink some warm water. Even better if it has a little fresh lemon or lime juice in it. And then give yourself time to eliminate every morning. That warm water softens your colon and allows things to start moving. So this could be the first thing that you add into your routine if you're not doing it. And once you get on that schedule of eliminating regularly every morning, it will be easier for you to notice when things go out of whack. So warm water to start the day, to soften your colon, get things moving. Spiritual practices, so meditation, contemplation, prayer, reading scripture, gentle exercise, move your body. So that's something to oppose kapha, to wake up your body. So you'll get actually more bang for your buck by exercising at this time of day, because not only will you be overcoming that heaviness of kapha, but kapha will help you to build muscle tone and just build nourishment in general through your exercise practice. But anything that you know you want to do for yourself, but it kind of gets away from you as the day goes, kapha will help you do it if you make it a routine. So a couple of more sort of Ayurveda specific practices that I think are especially beautiful. Oil massage. So like I said, one of the most beautiful self-care practices in Ayurveda is called abhyanga, which is self-oil massage. So using a warming oil like sesame in cooler months and a cooler oil like coconut in warmer months because we want to oppose. It soothes vata. It lubricates joints and skin. It settles the nervous system. So when you're doing abhyanga on yourself, you're applying the oil in long strokes on your limbs and circular strokes at the joints. And then let it sit on your skin and do some other things. If you have time, up to 20 minutes to have that oil on your skin is fantastic. But at the very least, do some things like floss your teeth, take care of other things in the bathroom before you get in your shower. And then no soap. Just let the steam open your pores and invite the oil deeper into your skin. The excess will automatically come off, but you don't want to scrub the oil off. Nasya oil is another really beautiful practice. It's an herbed oil, or it could even just be sesame oil, applied inside the nasal passages to moisture them. It's especially great to do nasya oil when in the cooler months, in the drier months, if you're going to be going outside to do any winter sports, skiing or anything like that, putting the nasya oil, moisturizing those nasal passages before you go out is going to help you to ward off bacteria and virus. Cracked, dry nasal passages are just a breeding ground for being able to invite those bacteria and viruses in. So then eat your breakfast after you shower. So Ayurveda says that if you eat first, then when you get in the shower, your body is going to be using its energy on temperature regulation rather than on digestion. So your digestion probably won't be as optimal if you're showering after you eat. And then Ayurveda also suggests that you eat 3 meals a day at the same time with no snacking. If you want to know more about that, I have a video series about digestion and weight, and we talk a lot more about eating 3 meals a day, no snacking, and other practices that have to do with how you eat. But for now, we're going to move on to the next phase of the day, which is 10 a.m. to 2 p.m., and that is ruled by Pitta. So, like the sun, as the sun travels through the sky in the middle of the day, it's highest. So, just like the sun, your digestive fire is also highest at that time. So, this is why we say have your biggest meal at lunch, because your digestion and your metabolism are able to handle it. Your activity can be most productive at this time. Remember that Pitta has to do with motivation. So, tackle your to do list and do the things that require the highest amount of motivation at this time of day. Because next, we're going to move into Vata from 2 p.m. to 6 p.m. So, does anyone else get distracted in the afternoons? The motivation diminishes. There's nothing wrong with you. This is Vata. So, take your shoes off, put your feet in the earth, on the grass if you can. Have an almond or a date. These are grounding practices and snacks. So save tasks for this time of day that allow for a wandering mind, right? Look at your day tomorrow. It's a good time for communication, emails. Remember that Vata is movement and communication is movement. Meetings, depending on the meeting. Creative tasks, brainstorming. So again, we're both leaning into the energy of the time and also opposing its extremes. So we're back into Kapha again from 6 to 10 p.m. So we kind of come full circle. We come back to Kapha. Your digestion is going to be slower again now. So take a lighter meal in the evening and be done by that meal by at least 8 p.m. Earlier is even better. And use your Kapha energy to move towards bed and sleep, to let yourself lean into that heaviness. It's a beautiful practice to give yourself a foot massage with oil, copaiba oil, essential oil, lavender essential oil, and if possible, be asleep by 10 p.m. Because I'm sure you know what's coming. At 10 p.m., Pitta is going to kick in again. So from 10 p.m. to 2 a.m., if you're still up, Pitta is going to kick in, the digestive fire will also kick in. If we're asleep, it's meant to be nourishing our organs and processing the day's impressions and food. But if you're up, that fire, instead of doing that work, it's going to ask us to take in more. We're going to do more. I don't know if you've noticed, if you're up late, you're going to get projecty. You'll take on a new project. You might consume more, eat more. And then that consumption in any form won't get a chance to be processed and transformed into nourishment and can lead to disturbed sleep. So from 2 to 6 a.m., we're back to Vata. And Vata is, the veil is thin with Vata. It's air, it's space, it's very, it's thin, it's light. So it's time for dreams. And if your Vata is very imbalanced, a symptom of that might be waking up at this time of night. And, you'll find yourself suddenly wide-eyed at 3 a.m. It's a good creative time for your brain when you're asleep like that. So coming up with new ideas. If you are inclined to wake up a little before 6, maybe if you're up at 5 or 5:30, it's a great time to journal, to remember your dreams, or to use that thin veil as a contemplative time if you like to meditate or pray. So these practices are incredibly simple and kitchen table wisdom, and it's also such a comprehensive system that you can keep learning more and more. The good news is to not get overwhelmed by anything is just, baby steps. It's taking on what you know is sustainable right now. And then when something becomes a part of your life, then adding something else. But it's also a principle that I really love called the 70-30 rule that my teacher taught me. So when we are relatively in balance, we can handle doing these practices 70% of the time and stay in balance. I know that I can be very all or nothing, right? If I'm not doing it perfectly or all the time, then never mind, I'm failing. But remembering this rule that if you look back at your week and you did the thing that you set a goal to do 4 or 5 days out of the week, you're doing so great, you're doing it. So it lets you give yourself grace and is in itself a part of balance. So if these practices feel like nothing but austerity, it's not balance. So find what feels like a balance of discipline and pleasure and look around. Notice how very like the environment you live in you are. And the presence you gain from that is itself worth it. And if you follow these practices, you will feel different. You will notice a change. So thank you. I'm so grateful for your time and attention. I'm honored to be here with you, and I hope that this was nourishing or inspiring in some way.